Good evening, and we begin with breaking news. And the US Coast Guard says a debris field has been discovered by a remote underwater vehicle searching the Atlantic for a missing submersible. We understand that the debris includes parts of the missing vessel. Earlier, officials predicted that the oxygen supply on board the Titan ran out at 12 this afternoon UK time. 5 men, including 3 Britons, are on board the vessel. Now, in the last hour, we've been talking to David Mearns, a search and rescue expert, who also knows 2 of the men on board the Titan. And he has been talking to us in the last few minutes about some information, David, that you have. And that seems to suggest, and it's information from out in the Atlantic, and it is information that says that this debris field is
it's being relayed from
Titan.
the ships.
So what are you hearing?
It's being relayed from the ships to the president of the Explorers Club, who's been across this entire thing for the past several days, that what has been found in terms of debris is the landing frame and also a rear cover. So it means the actual hull hasn't yet been found, but 2 very important parts of the whole system have been discovered, and that would not be found unless it's fragmented. It's come apart.
So this picture here we're seeing now, that's the landing frame you're talking about?
At the bottom, yes. And it sits on that, it's bolted to that, and that's how it docks itself into the launch and recovery system. And then the back sort of like fishtail shape, that's essentially what we call a fairing. Inside of that will be electronics and all sorts of things, and that's a fairing just to make it smooth. It's a cover that was bolted, but it comes off, relatively easy. So if the fairing is off and the frame is off, well, something very bad has happened to the entire structure.
Right.
So on the news that we have yet, they haven't found the hull of which the men are inside.
But what does it suggest, the information you're getting now, what does it suggest to you that has happened?
Something catastrophic. These things are not, they're not connected to the rest of the frame or the structure just by, masking tape. They're bolted, there are many bolts. There'll be an important part of the structure. The whole weight of the hull, which is the heaviest bit, is resting on that frame. So the brackets that tie that frame to the rest of the hull, you can see those rings around it, are key structural elements of this configuration.
Right.
And for that frame to be separated from the hull is not good.
And what was the other bit?
The fairing, the thing that says Ocean Gate Titan.
Right.
So that's just the shape that they probably made because it looks cool and looks like a fish and looks, sort of marine-like, but it's a fairing. It's a cover that comes off.
Right. Now, this is information not from the US Coast Guard, where we are getting most of our information. This is information you are receiving. Just explain to me how this information is coming to you. So this is from people in touch with rescuers.
That's right.
Or recovery workers at the scene.
Or people who are getting the information pretty much firsthand. And I've asked them, so they haven't found the hull yet. And all they come back is that's it so far. So, again, listen, we don't want to be doom merchants here and predicting the worst when it hasn't happened. But, we know the terminology that people use, and the Coast Guard wouldn't be using debris, and they wouldn't be reporting that from the scene unless this wasn't good. And from just looking at that and understanding how that structure is built together, if those 2 components are no longer connected to that hull, then something very drastically bad has happened. Then,
and the image we're also seeing is of the the vessels, the
Yeah.
marine traffic in the area, and presumably the search goes on for other parts of the
Yes.
vessel.
The four, right where it says RMS Titanic, those four blue dots, those are the four key ships. Two of them are diving with 6,000-meter ROVs. That is the Horizon Arctic, and that had the ROV that apparently found it, the Ulysses.
So the arrival of these ROVs
Today.
Is what has, today,
Yes.
and they went down this morning. This is what has changed things.
That's right. That's right. And they weren't on scene till today. The previous ships, and this is what was quite frustrating yesterday, two other ships had ROVs on board, but despite what we were hearing from the Coast Guard briefing, I don't believe they ever reached the bottom. They were never searching on the bottom. And they were also searching about 2.5 miles to the east of this location, where they were focused were on these apparent tappings. Well, now we know that that wasn't real. That was spurious. And today, when the true deep diving ROVs arrived, the 6,000-meter ones, on board the French vessel Atalante and also on the Horizon Arctic, they all centered on Titanic. And that told me that they had gone to a new location. They had given up on this position where they thought they had heard tapping. They're now going to the most likely location. When these subs dive, these tourist dives, almost anybody who comes on Titanic, what they want to do, the classic Titanic experience, is to come up on the bow. So you start from outside of the debris field, you dive down, and then you approach the bow and you come up to the pointy end of it. And it gives you that thrill of seeing the bow of Titanic, which is the best looking part of it. It's also the safest way to approach the wreck because you're not going through this field of wreckage. You're coming up to the biggest part of the ship.